Welcome to the Parts Party. I'm Adriana,
And I'm Ella.
and this is your invitation to hang out with us and our beautiful guests as we explore the lived experience of internal family systems. We want to share in our common humanity as humans who have multiple parts within us, so we can show you what it really is to honour this model of therapy in our own lives. This is a place for IFS nerds, therapists, enthusiasts, or just anyone who wants to get to know their parts and their self a little better.
So grab a soft drink for your little ones, a tea for your manager parts, and maybe something fancy for your firefighter parts. Because all parts are welcome. Our guest today is Bob Falconer, IFS author, teacher, and consultant. After a long career using many different therapeutic modalities, for more than a decade, Bob has devoted his practice exclusively to the internal family systems therapy. He's completed all the levels of training and studied with many of the senior IFS trainers. Bob has assisted at almost 20 official trainings and has assisted Richard Schwartz many times, in addition to co-authoring a book with him, Many Minds, One Self. Bob's also helped to train more than 1,000 people in IFS. For over a decade, Bob devoted himself to the research and the writing of his book, The Others Within Us. Bob's focus is now on facilitating consulting groups and teaching online workshops with various organisations around the world. Welcome to the Parts Party, Bob.
Thanks for having me.
Would you share with us a little bit about what it was like coming to IFS?
My own personal background is extreme, violent, sadistic, sexual, physical, emotional, and spiritual abuse. My father was a sadist, and he almost always had at least one of his cohorts living in the house with us, and he and his friends would rape and beat my brother and me almost daily. My mom was institutionalized repeatedly. My brother killed himself when we were teenagers. My father was murdered a few years later when I was 21. So, by all odds, I should be dead like my brother, in prison, living in a dumpster. The prognosis is not good. I think spirit helped me a lot and was largely responsible for my healing on a deeper level. But I'm also more stubborn than a mule. That can be a big advantage. It can also cause trouble, but it can be a big advantage. When I felt suicidal, I made this list of, if I'm really gonna do that, I ought to try this, and this first, because then I'll know it's useless. And I kept ticking things off the list, and they weren't small. They were like, get a master's degree, own a house, It wasn't like a weekend task. I kept adding stuff to the bottom.
Mm.
So that kept me going, and I haven't felt suicidal in a very, very long time. To me, the idea that we're made up of parts just seemed like a natural no-brainer. I knew I was. I spent a lot of time at the Esalen Institute doing Gestalt, which is a parts work model. I worked a lot with Jack and Helen Watkins, ego state therapy, which is another parts work model based explicitly on hypnosis and Freudian stuff, and also voice dialogue, psychosynthesis, transactional analysis. They're all parts work models. And then there are a lot of people, like the therapist I've seen most of my adult life, who sort of developed her own way of working with parts. She doesn't call them parts, she calls them insiders.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really sweet name. Each one of these traditions has special things of great value, I believe, that the others often don't. So I'm really glad I got this tour.
Yeah.
But I think IFS is the most potent and the most respectful. I didn't used to put these two words together in my head, but I think it is potent because it's respectful. One of the big differences about IFS is we don't bulldoze past the protectors. We get their permission before we go to the exiles. And many of the other modalities and many of the other people I worked with, when they had the sense of an exile in distress, they just wanted to go there full speed ahead and they didn't care what or who was in the way. And
Mm,
just
mm,
that seems compassionate and direct, but it's not, causes lots and lots of damage. Even though Dick never talks about respect, I think it might be the most important single quality in IFS.
Yeah, that idea that slow is fast, isn't it? That if we slow down, see who's around, make sure everyone's okay, that we can move forward in a way that doesn't take us 5 steps backwards. Yeah.
Yeah, get permission, get permission.
Mm.
mm. And what was it like for you? You said that parts wasn't new to you. You certainly had that. What was it like starting to engage with yourself as though you're a system of parts rather than a fixed personality?
That's, all my adult life. So,
Mm,
it's yeah, before then, I was so out of it, it's hard to say.
mm,
Both of my parents were addicts. Dad, a stone alcoholic, but high functioning. We always ate, and we went to church on Sunday, which was a monument to hypocrisy. And mom was more of a pill addict, but drank huge amounts sometimes too. When I was young, I was a freight train on a railroad track heading toward alcoholism myself. And I was already binge drinking and drinking a lot in high school. And then when I went to college in 1967, I started doing LSD. And that derailed the train.
mm,
I no longer was interested in alcohol. And that was such a blessing. Even though in those days we didn't have therapist directed sessions, we would do acid with each other and sit with each other. Then somehow I got the reputation at the university where I was, if somebody's having a bad time, call Bob.
Oh.
He 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 doesn't
got the
freak out.
reputation early.
Yeah. So that was a big start. Both it derailed all the alcohol addiction. It moved me more and more towards the therapy, which I had another career before I got professionally involved as doing therapy and counseling.
Hmm. It makes sense to me that you talk about the unattached burdens and that we just need to not be scared of them. If we can just be in self, we can support. And I'm really hearing that parallel of Trip City. People can be going through all sorts of things. It can be quite distressing for our parts when someone's so away from a sort of shared reality. But if we can just not be scared and be with them, our nervous system can support them through those difficult psychedelic moments.
I think so. You know, one of my big heroes in the psychedelic world is William Richards, Bill Richards, the guy who worked with Roland Griffiths, with more psilocybin experiences than probably anybody on the planet. I think he just retired at the age of 83 or so. And somebody was saying, what are the most important qualities in somebody who wants to sit with others doing psychedelic medicine? And he said, number one, far and away the most important quality, you have to be comfortable with not knowing what's going on.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
hard. It sounds sort of brain dead or something, but it's very, very difficult.
And Bob, how do your insiders show up? Like, are they voices that you hear or you feel them? How do you know or sense your parts?
Sometimes I hear them, sometimes I see them, sometimes I still get completely blended with them and feel their feelings and move their movements, and I don't think there's any way they don't show up,
Hmm.
Mm, mm.
which is actually a blessing because some people like Dick never see anything inside. So I'm really grateful they can show up in all these different ways.
I'd love to switch into talking about unattached burdens a little bit more, if that's okay, especially when we're talking about that importance of not fearing them or the willingness to go into the unknown. We all know, of course, the phrase no bad parts is so central to IFS, but then unattached burdens, when you describe interacting with them, they're often described as malevolent, or they explicitly say that they don't have any positive intention. And I'll admit I have some curiosity and skepticism because, on a universal level, I often feel that nothing is definitively bad. It's maybe love that's just been forgotten. When I was reading your description of compassionate dispossession and spiritist traditions in your book, The Others Within Us, that actually struck me as resonant with that, almost like unattached burdens to a lost and suffering, even if they don't belong inside us. You said they fear sometimes that they may not be welcomed back to the light.
I'd love to hear more about how you see this and how you have reconciled that idea of no bad parts with your work with unattached burdens.
To me, it's pretty easy. They aren't parts of us.
Mm,
And for many people, it's an ideologically totally unacceptable idea that there could be something that has profound influence on who we are inside our psyches that is not part of us. That is really destabilizing for the Western worldview. I want to go into this a little bit. There's a
mm,
wonderful anthropologist named Tanya Luhrmann who says, we in the West have what she calls the citadel model of mind. And we believe that our minds are contained in this nice, bony little structure. They're private, they're ours, they constitute our identity, and nobody gets in or out. And that looks strong, a citadel, a fortress. It's actually very weak because it's really brittle. You hear one voice or sense something in there that you don't know what or where it's from, and you shatter. Whereas in other cultures with more porous models of mind, that's not it's not such a big deal. Lorman's done these studies. She focuses on psychosis and spirituality, the interplay. And she studied outcomes with psychosis in the United States, Ghana, and India. This was a long time ago. She's got a lot more sophisticated studies with more locations now. And we spend something like 1,000 times as much as either of those two places. We get the worst results. And
mm,
worse than that, that's crazy in the even worse than that, we are exporting our methods and wiping out the native method.
Oh,
mm,
gosh.
I mean, it's like double down on stupid. I have to laugh or I'd be crying. Orman thinks a major reason for this is that we have this citadel model of mind,
mm,
and they don't. They have porous models of mind. She says in Accra, Ghana, it's what she calls cosmocentric. They believe we are a porous part of the whole cosmos, and they expect trees and spirits and divinities to communicate and interact with them. In India, she says it's much more like a sociocentric model of self, where it's modeled after the social system. So they hear a voice in their head, they go, oh, that's just like my aunt. She was always nagging me.
mm,
You don't go, oh, my brain's broken. I have to take these meds that are going to turn me into a jellyfish for the rest of my life. And the other thing that's really bad about the way we treat psychosis, or at least I think, we tell people usually the most intense visionary and emotional experiences of their life are absolutely meaningless. That's just such a horrible message. And it turns out, when I started researching this, Europe and Europe-influenced countries in the past 400 years are probably the only place in the history of humanity that has this citadel model of mind. Or we have it by far the worst. I think there's a lot of philosophers and other people who are agreeing this is the kind of change we have to have. And I think mainstream IFS, with this idea of multiplicity of mind, that's already revolutionizing psychotherapy in a great, wonderful, astounding way. Changes so much. But if you add this other dimension of porosity of mind, it can make even bigger differences. I'm gonna go way out on a limb, but that's
Please.
where I live. I think this citadel model of mind is the root cause of the modern epidemic of mental illness. If you actually believe your mind's a citadel, you will feel alienated. A citadel is almost a definition of alienation. And it's not just an intellectual idea. Oh, I think it's lived. Daniel Siegel, the interpersonal neurobiology guy, says this is built into the grammar of our modern European languages. We can't even think about it. It's, it's so
mm,
built in. And I think if you accept this idea of porosity of mind, the idea of unattached burdens and guides, all sorts of other beings, and they're not just energies, they're beings, can be in our system and influence us heavily. Why not? It sort of makes sense. And the porous model of mind also can contain all sorts of extrasensory perception stuff to be expected. They're not weird.
Feel like it all comes back to fear and rigidity. Like once we've got that citadel model, we go everything, every explanation we fit, anything that scares us, we have to find a way to fit it into this box back again, even if it makes absolutely no sense. And even if it means that we're going to label you with all these diagnoses and give you pills. That's how we can control the fear of that unknown now that we've got this belief that we're so rigidly holding on to. I remember at one point in your book, you were talking about that value of the inner experience and how so many other cultures, that's just built into the fabric of how they work. And as therapists, we kind of take that for granted too, because we, even if we're Western, if we're IFS therapists, we very much lean into going into the inner experience. But so many people, they kind of still devalue that subjective experience. And I really appreciated you said something about they go in just enough to be able to put a bandage on it and come back out to the external world. And I
Yeah.
really appreciated that. Ooh, that scares us a little bit. What can we do to put a bandage on it so that we can ignore that something else has come in or that there's something else going on that's outside of the confines of those walls that we think are there so that we can stay here?
Yeah. And one way people do this is to ridicule people like me who insist
Mm,
it's not right.
mm,
Ridicule, make fun of, dismiss. There's mountains of data for all kinds of extrasensory stuff. And the quote skeptics, who are not skeptics, they're fundamentalists, they just ignore all the data. They say stuff like, that couldn't be true, so I'm not even going to look at the data. It's
Yeah.
like, whoa,
mm,
that's impenetrable.
mm,
I want to say one other thing that I think is really important. In IFS, we know that protectors always tend to elicit from the outside world what they fear the most.
mm.
Just this really unfortunate law. So if you have this citadel model of mind, what's that going to elicit? Attack.
Mhm.
Mm,
No,
mm,
you're going to end up feeling alienated in a hostile universe.
mhm,
Yeah. Bob, the Others Within Us has been out a couple of years now, and you talked about ridicule. How's the journey for your parts been to be kind of the face of this more esoteric IFS? And I know it's so well researched. There's pages and pages at the end of the book of references.
Yeah, and I actually read all that stuff. It's gotten a lot better. At first, Dick didn't want me to publish the book, and the Institute didn't want to have anything to do with me. And I just felt this information is so important. And some people, when they have something like this in them, they can get tremendous relief without a whole lot of skill and a whole lot of time.
Mm.
Sometimes it's astounding, like that very first case I mentioned in the book. I wasn't going to be silenced. I felt sort of almost exiled from my own IFS community. It seems more and more well accepted or more and more tolerated.
mm.
Thank you for your courageous paths, for speaking to.
Mule like stubbornness. I
Uh-huh. Yeah.
When you were early in this journey discovering this stuff, whether it was in your own inner experience, whether it was working with clients, did you ever feel like you were crazy or it was a waste of time? I've definitely had that feeling sometimes when I've had inner experiences and just these insights that are way beyond me come in or something happens and I'm like, whoa, I want to pursue this, but then I feel like that's very crazy and outside the norm. Have you had that feeling?
in kind of a different way, I think. In the book, I described this case in some detail. I was being a PA in one of the IFS trainings, and in one of the triads I was supervising, this woman had something in her that looked to me like a UB. I just heard the name, I didn't really know anything. And I'd sort of dismissed it as that's too weird. I took over the session from the guy because he was really uncomfortable. And she had something in her that wasn't part of her. It looked to her like a bloodshot eyeball, and it just said the meanest, nastiest stuff. It had no good intention anywhere. Just, I will destroy you. You're a creep. You're disgusting. On and on and on. So ask it, are you a part? Are you a part? And it's, it didn't want to answer, didn't want to answer, and then kept doing it. And then it said through her to me, that's a very stupid question. You're supposed to be a teacher. Don't you have anything smarter to ask? And I said, "It may be stupid, but it's simple. Are you a part of her?" And finally it roared out, "No, I'm not." and I'm going to crush you like a worm the same way I'm going to crush her. That's a UB. For some reason, I think spirit was with me. I wasn't scared. I didn't know much. I basically said, "This is not a part of you. You need to let this go. We don't integrate the," and she got it out. I did well. I debriefed the group, sounding as though I knew what I was doing. And then I went into the staff meeting and my body temperature dropped and I couldn't get warm, even with blankets and stuff. And people were teasing me, Bob the Ghostbuster. And I lost it. And I was really insulting with some of my old, and I had to apologize. So that night I was thinking, I don't know what this was, but we'll just ignore that. But then she started sending me these emails, and they were very long. I thought I'd triggered a manic episode because she said, "Oh, I see these colors now and on and on." But then she sent me one that changed my life. She said, "Bob, I didn't tell you this, but when I was a teenager, I tried to kill myself many times, and I was in hospital many times." And then she said, "When I tried to tell people about the non-human in me back then, they gave me electroshock and horrible drugs. You're the first person to ever believe me, and you've changed my life." And my response to that was, "Oh, now I can't ignore it."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Spirit had other ideas for you.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I followed her for 10, 15 years now, and I think it's more like 15 because that bio you read's a little dated, but she has flowered. She was already doing quite well, but she has really, really flowered since then and continues to see this a life-changing event. I knew almost nothing, and it was only like 50 minutes, and it was a life-changing event. So I'm not gonna ignore this now.
Yeah.
Mm.
Something's going on here that's important.
Skepticism goes out the window when you have evidence like that.
But also, I
Mm.
had my undergraduate degree and a little bit of grad work is in anthropology, and the
Mm.
study of spirit possession is everywhere. It's all
Mm.
over the planet. It's one of the most widely spread characteristic beliefs among humans, and I just started thinking, there's some kind of basic dynamic that can happen in people when something that's not part of them gets into them, and it can have really positive effects or really negative ones. And the metaphor that's usually been used to describe this is spirit possession, but whatever we call it, it's worthy of study. It's everywhere. It determines so much about how people can be on the planet. So that anthropology background helped me a lot too.
I've heard you talk before and say many people have unattached burdens. They've been in me, they've been in others. Are you willing to share a personal experience of what that's like?
Sure. Yeah. I think it's important to say sexual abuse almost injects these things into people. So I'll give you an example of one that I told you my mother was also abusive, and she did her best to turn me into an invalid so that she would have some captive food. Anyway, at one point I was given a diagnosis and told I was going blind, and I'm not. I'm doing real well. But Dick and I were working, and we saw this thing in my eyeball that looked like a spider with a scorpion's tail, and it was stinging the retina. And the symptoms of the eye disease were I'd get blisters on the retina. And if that keeps going and gets bad, they start bleeding into the eye, and then you're blind, basically. And that was mom. That was her energy in there. And we were able to get that thing out of my eye and send it off. And I'm doing way better than the doctors thought was possible.
Amazing. Could you feel something different as it left? Like, what was the actual experience like of that being removed, Bob?
I could, but I was immediately second guessing myself.
Ha, yeah.
Mm.
It's just too weird again, Bob.
Yeah.
Mm.
That's
Yeah.
really comforting to hear that even in that experience and as experienced as you are, that that second guessing still comes in. It's like it's so abstract and weird sometimes.
Yeah. And it's super important to welcome in the skeptical parts with stuff like this. Most of the people I work with have them. And I say things like, I'm so glad you're here, skeptical part. We need you. We need your intelligence and your clear sight. But
Mm.
right now, it's too soon to be drawing conclusions. We need to focus on data collection. That's a huge job. There's a vast universe of data inside here. Would you be willing to stay and help us collect data in a clear and precise way? And almost always the skeptical parts are go, okay. You know,
It's a good job for
we
them.
don't need to
Yeah.
fight with them or argue with them.
Mm, it's beautifully put. Yeah, I remember in The Others Within Us, you talked about the distinction between inner experience and being in your head. And you were like, I want to stay practical and pragmatic. I don't want to go too philosophical because then I can just get stuck in my head. And there was that 12-step quote, when I'm in my mind, I know I'm in a dangerous neighborhood. How do you find that line between inner and going into the mind?
Big thing is bringing it back to the body.
Mm.
If somebody starts having all these brilliant, wonderful theories about what the nature of this thing is that they're dealing with, I just will say, how do you experience that presence right now in the present moment in and around your body? And then they'll say, oh, it's a heaviness. And then, oh, is the heaviness spread evenly all over your body, or is it especially pressing in one place? Does it pulsate, vibrate, or move? Or is it like rock solid? And is it hot, cold? What color is it? Does it have a smell? Does it have a texture? You can see there's a whole almost infinite number of questions you can ask. Do you hear sounds? And then, oh no, wait a minute, take a moment and listen. There are probably some quiet sounds in there as you experience this heaviness. You're bringing them back to their inner world. And this is actually training people in interoception. Well, we should have courses in that in school because now there's all this evidence. Everybody with an eating disorder has poor interoception skills. I know we shouldn't say everybody, but close enough. All sorts of borderline personality, treatment-resistant depression, all these things correlate with poor interoception. And it's trainable. That's the good news. What I was just telling you about tracking all those different sensory, that's a training in interoception. I'm going to go a little farther on this because I think it's so important. In anthropology, they talk about inner sense cultivation. And there's several theories of shamanic initiation that say what shamanic initiation really is a training in inner sense cultivation. And then Lorman goes further and says prayer in most religious traditions is actually inner sense cultivation. You know, with autistic kids, often can't even sense where their body is. And some people say that's why they flap their hands so much, so they know where their hands are. So it goes all the way from that to the refined subtleties of prayer and meditation. So this interoception, inner sense cultivation is a super important thing.
Mm. And does seem aligned, this monomind rigidity that you talked about. I often think about people just being like a head on a stick. They really have no sense of what is going on for them emotionally, somatically at all. Mm.
Yeah. There is no, really, I don't think. If they're like that, well, what's blocking it when you look in there?
Mm.
How's that feel?
Yes.
Is that a steel wall? Is it a stone wall? Does it go forever up and forever down? It's just deeper and deeper levels of sensory-based, inner world-focused curiosity.
Mm. Yeah, nothing is something. So find
Yeah,
out more about what that is. Yeah.
with blackness. Oh, is the blackness the same kind of black in every direction? Soft and mushy like a cloud, or is it hot or cold? You know, there are all these questions.
Yeah.
I'd love to pivot a little bit for a moment and talk about self, because that's so fundamental to IFS. I'm wondering if you'd like to speak at all as to how you experience self or self energy or how you understand it.
Well, first, I'm gonna say something I'm not supposed to, because that's what I like to do. My 12-year-old, he won't quit. I think that came up with self as a way to dumb down spirituality enough so that modern academics could tolerate it. And that's really having to dumb it down a lot. Oh, I'm gonna get in trouble. That's okay.
Thanks
When
for doing it on our podcast.
when I'm in session with a person, and it's different for everybody I've ever talked to, no two people experience the same thing. I get like
Yeah.
tunnel vision. The
Mm.
whole world disappears except the person I'm working with. And everything on the periphery gets into sort of this vague, fuzzy, non-focused state, and that person becomes my entire universe.
Mm.
And often tears start running down my face. When I first met Dick, he was saying, "Oh, self doesn't weep." But thank God he changed that opinion, because otherwise I would have been doing everything wrong all along.
Well, it's not sad tears, is it? It's the tears of kind of the heart cracking open. It's a different feeling. Yeah.
And I don't know if you know this, but I just published a book on Swedenborg and IFS with a couple major Swedenborgians. And Swedenborg, very, very similar to IFS in many ways, 250 years ago. He calls it the place of inflow. And he explicitly talked about the divine. He says there's a place in us where the divine inflows into us. And this is IFS self. And just like with IFS self, he said, nothing you can do, no matter what kind of hell realm you live in, anything, you can't damage that place of inflow. Just like Dick says about self. I think that's one of the most revolutionary and wonderful messages in IFS. You can't damage self. Because men like me were told, you're damaged goods, expect a miserable little life, take meds, sorry. That's just so wrong. I think the more you go into self, Dick now talks about it as a particle and a field. Inside of us, we can experience it as a particle, but you start connecting to this larger self, it's more a field. And I've even heard him say there might only be one self. And now we're clearly talking about access to spirit and spirit realm and guides and guidance and all of that. I want to go off a little bit. I hate coloring inside the lines.
Please scribble away.
Um, in studying all the anthropology, the vast majority of it is positive and sought after. As therapists, of course, we see the sort of ugly side first, but also our culture is all on this nasty stuff. But so many traditions, people went out, and Vision Quest, that's seeking spirit possession and spirit contact. Over and over and over again, people devoted years of their life and did arduous things to have this kind of contact. I think this is the vast majority. And because we've gotten so frightened of the negative stuff, we lost all that good stuff too. And another, to me, corroborating bit of evidence is Roland Griffiths and Bill Richards did these big studies of meeting entities in DMT experiences. About 50% of the people who have medium to high dose DMT meet intelligent, conscious beings. That's a lot. Everybody wanted to ignore this, but it ain't going away yet. But the interesting thing here, the descriptors most often checked for these beings, wise one, guide, angel, all these positive things. That's like 80% or more of what the people doing high dose psychedelics experience. It's in this citadel model of mind. Yeah, it might keep out, I don't even think it does, some of this negative influence, but it blocks out all this wonderful stuff and opening and ecstatic states. And
I guess it could be argued that's just imagination under the influence of psychedelic medicines. However, they're often the same entities that we meet when you describe them. So there's something more going on there.
yeah, I think the Western understanding of imagination is totally wrong.
Yeah.
Mm.
I don't know if you guys are familiar with Henri Corbin and the imaginal realm, mundus imaginalis, he called it.
Yes.
And the Sufis were big on this. There is a realm between objective and subject. According to Corbin and many others, it's real. Ontologically, it exists as much as the physical world does, and it determines a great deal about our lives. Modern example of this, of all places, comes from Winnicott, the Freudian working with kids. He says play is a space that's in between reality and fantasy.
Mm.
He says childhood play is not trivial at all. All human culture comes from childhood play. All human creativity is based on childhood play. So if you want to try and discount, quote, the imaginary, you have to throw out culture, creativity, all this other stuff goes with it. We have a really skewed and sick attitude.
True. Even the way I said that, oh, it's just imagination, as if to really discount that it's not
Mm.
real.
Jung said there are three kinds of imaginary. There's fantasy, and he said, that stuff doesn't matter. Then he said, there's passive imagination. And he had two big examples of that: dreams and psychosis.
Mm,
And then he said, there's an active imagination, and that's his practice of active imagination, where you dialogue with these entities you meet inside. And he said that is very, very powerful and life transforming. I think Jung's practice of active imagination and interacting with these beings is another very, very important forerunner of IFS helping people develop self-part relationships.
mm. I remember you writing about his experience writing the Red Book and how he feared going into psychosis and his sanity, but he did it. He persisted and went through and did that.
He said one of the reasons why he could do that, and he said Nietzsche couldn't, was that he had a family and a career and responsibilities, and he had this big flywheel of daily life, kept him on track. One other thing I want to say about this, our culture of all the history of humanity probably is the worst in supporting people who are having these kinds of experiences.
Mm,
Almost
mm,
every other culture has some kind of container that can receive and support visionary experience. We don't. We devalue it. You're crazy. Take meds. Your brain's broken. Those messages destroy people who, if they were supported in a good way, could bring back beautiful, wonderful, and valuable things.
mm, mm,
I think these beings, when they are greeted with hostility and fear and contempt and all the other things we throw at, they tend to get hostile and contemptuous back.
that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was also thinking about when you were talking about in the Others Within Us, the shamans, how they often have two different eyes and they see, one in this world and one in the other. I really related to that because I don't have two different eyes, but sometimes I feel like I'm in two dimensions. Like when you're in that inner world and you're just really traversing that and having all these insights or whatever is going on in there. And then you kind of return back to the real, in quote unquote, real world. It can feel kind of absurd. In comparison? Yeah, I'm curious, what's it been like for you integrating all of this stuff into everyday life?
Well, my everyday life is pretty weird.
Perfect.
And, you know, I didn't start this work, with UBs and guides and stuff until I was already in my 60s, really. I'm 77
Mm,
now. By that time, when I started this work, I didn't really need a career anymore.
mm,
I could retire, but this so fascinated me. So I was sort of free of many of these sort of ordinary restraints and things that limit people in doing this. I was well positioned to hear about these kinds of things. What's it like for me integrating this? By most people's standards, I think I live a somewhat hermit-like life. I live up on a mountain. I go into town 2, maybe 3 times a week. I'm out here in the forest and writing and teaching online and doing stuff like this.
Sounds beautiful. Mhm.
idyllic.
Is it you, Bob? I don't know where I heard this talk about dancing with the trees outside. And you said self is not always calm. Sometimes it's ecstatic dancing with the forest. I always remembered that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's another huge mistake. Well, in our therapy office, most of the time we have to have people sit down, be quiet, not make too much noise. By having that sort of low arousal model of healing, and like enlightenment is this, Buddha-like immobility. No, the most ancient human religious experiences were group ecstasy, dancing all night long.
Mm,
As high an arousal state as you can get to, and then more.
Yeah.
mm,
Dick even said the first time he experienced self was doing sports when he got into a flow state, which means he was exerting himself to his absolute maximum. And then there was this little thing that lifted him beyond that. In therapy land, we pretty much ignore all high arousal healing states. And that's tragic.
Yeah, it makes me think of again, Western culture and Citadel mind, and it's like the only acceptable view of any kind of self or enlightenment or spirit is maybe if you're sitting meditating and you're just in absolute peace. That's kind of the only thing that they envision. There's so
And
much more nuance than that.
yeah, and many people have said this Citadel model of mind originated around the time of the Reformation, Counter-Reformation, 1500s. Well, Barbara Ehrenreich, the late Barbara Ehrenreich, was, I think, another brilliant mind. She said that was the end of collective joy.
Oh.
That we used
Mm.
to have these, ecstatic dances and festival and carnival and all this stuff, and it all got stamped out then. And she's showing how it keeps trying to come back in more and more unapproved of ways. I don't think it's a coincidence that this citadel model of mind and the exiling of collective joy and ecstatic healing happened at about the same time.
It's so sad. For most of my adult life, I've been occasionally going to psychedelic trance festivals in the Australian bush and everyone dancing as one to these huge, big sound system. And yeah, collective ecstasy is so important. Yeah, I don't know who I'd be without that. Yeah.
Mm. I think of so many people in, I don't know, I'm thinking my cult 20s, 30s in the city area, that the only way they know how to find it is through drinking or through drugs or party culture. It's sad. It's like a distorted version of it because that collective joy wasn't able to be just claimed on its own.
Yeah. Actually, I think it limits it horribly.
Mhm.
Could hold that in a more sacred container, they could get a lot higher.
Mm,
And
mm, mhm.
Jung said, "The gods have come back to us as diseases." If you don't worship or welcome a god and find some good way to relate to it, it comes back angry
Mm.
and pissed.
And we
So,
need that higher connection, don't we? Or deeper connection, however you'd
yeah.
say it. Yeah.
One other thing I'll say, and it's a whole 'nother topic that I could easily talk about for 20, 30 hours. The Buddhist idea of near enemies. I think every virtue has a near enemy. The
Mm,
near enemy of ecstatic dance is a drunken brawl.
mm,
In the Buddhist, the four immeasurables are their biggest virtues. One of them is equanimity. The far enemy of that is agitation, anger, distress. Pretty obvious. The near enemy is numbing, spiritual
Yeah.
bypass, very subtle, and perhaps even more poisonous than the other. It makes going in this direction even more tricky because every great virtue can just be tweaked a little bit and it becomes damaging.
Yeah, and yet it speaks as self, and tries to trick us. "Oh, yes, I'm
Yep.
there."
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Mm.
Exactly.
yeah, there was a line you said in your book of simply witnessing, as in mindfulness, is not fully compassionate. And I remember my head being tweaked a little bit, going, yeah, because so many people think that if you just sit and you're witnessing that or being mindful or meditating, that that's going to bring you that state. But yeah, it's kind of making me think of that near enemy.
Yeah.
It's
And
self like.
that is from Dick, that
Mm,
illness is not real compassion. If you saw
right.
a kid being beat up in the street, just sitting there and being aware of its suffering would not
Mm,
cut the mustard. You
mm,
have to go help the kid.
Yeah,
mm.
and we'd love to finish the episode first if there's anything you'd like to share with listeners about what you're offering or what you're up to that we can put in the show notes.
Okay, yeah, my website is robertfalconer.us, and my assistant will be really happy I mentioned that. I have that book on Swedenborg, Opening the Inner World, with Chelsea Odner and Jonathan Rose. And I will have another book out in a couple weeks. I'm going to have two books out this year. This one's called Spirit Speaks, and it's a summary of the over 3,000 pages of conversations I've had with benevolent guides in a very a very short summary compared to the length of the data. And I'm working on two other books. And there's another one. 20 some years ago, I wrote an autobiography of the early stages of healing from sadistic child sexual abuse. Hopefully, next year, I'll have this book out on the role of spirit in healing because I've come to believe we do not heal without finding some way to access to spirit. It doesn't happen.
Mm.
Mm.
Bob, would you like to share a quote or a poem to finish the episode?
Okay, I have a quote, and it's from a relatively obscure author. So, unless some of your people have been following me, they probably never heard this before, and I like it a lot. It's a guy named Michael Ventura, who's a storyteller. You are not one person, you are many people. You are a community of moods and selves under one name. Parts of you aren't even human. They're part mammal, part reptile, part rose, part moon, part wind. And life is a question of which parts are dominant, which, in effect, possess you. I think most people walk around possessed by the dullest parts of themselves. This, the worst state of possession, is called normal.
It's fabulous.
Oh, it's so good.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for gifting us some of your time, Bob.
Okay, you're very welcome. It's been delightful being with you. Blessings.
Thank you for being part of the Parts Party with Adriana and Ella. We hope you enjoyed being with us, and we wish you many moments of self-leadership. We'd love your support by liking, subscribing, sharing this podcast, and we hope to see you next time.